On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about how to service customized systems. What are some ways that programmers and integrators and other service providers can differentiate themselves? And what is the value in being niche? All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
State of Control, episode 55, Flappy Bird.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. So on today's show, we're going to talk about some unique and customized control solutions and some ways that programmers and integrators and even manufacturers can offer opportunities to differentiate themselves and do things that are a little bit beyond the norm. So with me to discuss this topic are some guests that I think have a lot of insight, and I'll introduce them to you now. First and foremost, my partner at A State of Control. Let me welcome Rich Vergoza. How are you today, Rich?
Good. Mellow West Coast greetings. It's good to get the band back together. So it's been a little bit. So actually enjoying not being completely soaked in California. So we're returning to those West Coast vibes.
Very nice. And next is he comes to us from Germany, and he's a friend, and he's an often guest on A State of Control. His name is Patrick Murray, and he's from LearnAVProgramming.com. How are you, Patrick?
Doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on again.
Anytime. And last but not least, he's new to State of Control, but not new to the AV industry. His name is Mark Day, and he comes from IdeaBox. How are you today, Mark?
I'm doing well, Steve. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. So lately, we've talked a lot about the idea of basic and simple and no programming required configurable systems with limited customization. Today, we're going to flip over to the other end of the spectrum, and we're going to talk about the value, the benefit, and how you get to providing customized solutions that differentiate and provide a niche and are frankly a little bit more interesting for programmers and even for clients. Which I'm going to start the conversation with you, because I know that you do a lot of bespoke systems, and I know that this is probably an area of strength for you. Are these custom systems, these higher end or just the more elaborate control solutions, are they a dying breed, or are they something that you just have to find the right customer or the right application?
It's always felt like in the industry that, the ultra high end, whether it was commercial or Knox or residential, it's always been the great white whale, right? It's always been the one that, when guys were starting out, the big job, right? Kind of the one that they hung their hat on and they'd get their magazine spreads or the story on, or take really pretty pictures and post on the wall. And I think for any company starting out and for any company owner starting out, there's a bit of ego involved initially that, you want to show that you can bag the big one. It didn't and doesn't always make the best business sense to go after that route, because it does require a different focus, a different support network, just a different way of operating in general. To go after that, and that may or may not contribute to your long-term company health and growth. So, from the beginning, where is there as much there? No, I would say that market is coming to a finer point, because we are finding that there are lots of solutions out there that a lot of clients who aren't being presented with the alternatives go, it works just fine. And keeping in mind, and we've said it over and over and over on, I don't know, at this point, how many hundreds of shows, Mobile changed the landscape completely. Where when 25 years ago, literally one-off solutions, it was, you can go to any place in the country and every guy that you spoke to was doing a one-off solution, and they had their own quote-unquote secret sauce that they were working on. With the advent of mobile, there was a flattening of the playing field, and there was a changing of expectations from clients, not only from a control standpoint, but what they were willing to accept. And some clients, it raised their threshold of what they were willing to accept. And for other clients, it lowered the threshold of what they were willing to accept. And what we've been seeing now with the proliferation of like configurable systems and, kind of add-on block systems, it can meet the needs of a lot of clients. And so the clients who've said, I absolutely have to have something that is mine and uniquely mine, there are less of those clients there. They are still there. And I think there's enough work for any company out there, but it does require a different tactic. And I think at the same time, companies need to take a look at how are they going to keep the lights on as well while they're going after those projects. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, it's dwindling. And more people are going to try to go after that same prize. The difference is that it has really shaken out the caliber and the quality of companies who are going after that because they do have to differentiate themselves. They can't just come in and say, hey, I've got this thing that I wrote 5 years ago that I've used in 50 different houses. That's actually my secret sauce. That doesn't work anymore. It's changed from being guys who are integrator, installers, who kind of do some programming to requiring real, legitimate software developers to be involved.
Patrick, I'll toss it over to you. Rich talked a lot about, large intricate systems that require this type of customization. Are there other ways that we can include customization that don't require us trying to find that ideal top of the mountain case of a project?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But finding it, that's the trick, right? So you mentioned configurable solutions, and those are really great. And large manufacturers are going to make those configurable solutions to make it easy to do most projects. So let's say those are 90% of the projects. Well, what about that other 10%? That's still a lot of work to be done. And those aren't always big jobs. For example, I'm working with an integrator who works a lot in the house of worship market, and they make their own DSP. So we're writing an app for them to control it. And that's a really very specific niche. It's not going to be the biggest company in the world, but it's a nice little bunting type of an application that'll get used over and over again and solve a problem that may be too small for some of the larger manufacturers to go after.
Mark, I know that you have done a little bit of work involving mobile and mobile apps, and Rich mentioned how mobile has influenced our industry. What are some ways that you've seen us being able to leverage that rather than it being a threat?
Well, I think that Rich pretty much summed it up. Your original question about those jobs being out there and do people really want kind of high-end custom and then Patrick, saying, hey, there's about 10% out there. But even the example that Patrick kind of gave was something that integrators weren't doing 10 years ago. That's something like a software developer might have done 10 years ago, right? A custom app for a custom DSP. So now you're really just not even in that integrator category, really. You're a software developer that's writing a custom application for a DSP. It could be a custom application for anything, So I just think that, to echo both of these guys' sentiments, it's been moving towards software development. We've been moving, guys who are kind of into the software, moving into more just being software developers, and kind of away from being integrators. And I think that that's the future. And your question about, you working in the mobile space and what can you utilize there to differentiate yourself? To be honest, that's what we've done is we're not taking what we've learned from our mobile space and applying it back to how can we make our integration better, what we've done is, hey, we've been designing and programming these systems for 10 years. What else can we do? And so we're doing something completely kind of different, because it seems to me that it is kind of dying, that bespoke custom system that requires that skill set in the audio video world. So what we've done is we're building something where it is a one size fits all, right? Just for hospitality, that can scale, that you can push software updates up to, and then all of your customers get that same kind of feature set, that you kind of move to a recurring monthly revenue model where you're just that software as a service model, I view as the future. Because it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever it was, that when we designed these bespoke systems, we were offering functionality that their neighbors or friends didn't have. Now it's really flipped. We can't write software that's as good as the software that Apple comes out with or someone else comes out with, that every day is solving a larger and larger percentage of what we were doing. And we can't write it as good. We don't have the money or the time or the customer base to scale it that well. So when a Nest thermostat comes out and you slide and utilize their scheduler, you look back at the scheduler you've been doing for HVAC for 20 years, you being the collective you, and you go, man, why would I ever do that again when this is already so much better and all they do is thermostats? Does that make sense?
I would offer, but in one token, though, that none of our schedulers have ever frozen houses during a firmware update that went across hundreds of thousands of units as well. So, it is a double-edged sword. And I think you're right. I think as well, too, and I've thought about this often, it's like, do you want to be kind of the Flappy Bird of integration software, right? Do you want to be that one-hit wonder? I don't know if you guys remember, but there was this app that came out that was just ridiculous. It was just it was insane how it was just this little basic concept. It was this one guy who came out with an idea, and it kind of just mushroomed and took off, and it just took off like wildfire. But at the same token, the development didn't occur, and everything changed, and people's tastes changed, and it went away just as quickly as it did. Now, the person who developed it was a windfall in terms of the income, but couldn't quite figure out what to do with it. And with these companies, I think that absolutely, you're not going to fight the 800-pound gorilla in the industry. And whether it's GAFA or any other acronym that's coming out, I can't even keep track of the acronyms anymore. I agree that you partner with who's doing things well, and then you go, what's still missing? And I think that's the key to any company who is planning on doing what we do. Is where can you still be different? And I've said it time and time again, where Patrick's approach that he took initially with was it Swipe, the original
AV GUI, I think you're talking about.
Yeah, that was a different approach to it, which I thought was novel. I hoped it was your Flappy Bird, the way that I looked at it, right? It's I'm with you. I think that absolutely these guys these larger companies are doing lots of things better. They have lots of engineers. They have a huge market share, and they're going to drive what we have to follow up with. Because we had it happen in the industry where skeuomorphic was the rage for user interfaces, right? Photorealistic icons, and everybody did photorealistic, and then all of a sudden, Sir John Ivey, thanks, John, decided one day he woke up that he's going, I'm going flat and monochromatic. Every interface from there on out changed all over again. And the issue sometimes with the larger companies is that you also have to be careful about not buying into the fads. And these companies are typically moving software to also move hardware. And that's the thing that we don't do a lot of times, that we have to be careful about. So I find your point fascinating, because it's like, where do you fit in as a company? How do you position yourself?
I think what this really comes down to is dealing with the risk of technology. And it's not just a technological risk, it's the risk of all the fads that are attached to it, and also how fast the technology changes, and choosing what underlying technologies you're going to learn and apply, and what types of systems you're going to go after to kind of do a little differently. And I don't think it's matters if you're a business or you're just thinking about your career. Things are changing. We're in technology. They change rapidly. And I think this is something that we're all just kind of have to deal with at some point. Which direction are we going to take things in?
So, Patrick, I'll stay with you on this. We talked about Mark talked a lot about how we have to look at this from more of a software development approach, and I know that's a little bit of a passion of yours as well. So, what is different about software development that separates itself from what we were previously doing?
The amount of resources, basically, the openness, the amount of the barriers to entry are almost non-existent. You could download any of these frameworks on your laptop and just run them with the simple commands. There's no compile, upload, reboot. There's no training that you must attend to. There's no certifications that you must have to take a look at it. It's all open and out there, and they have huge support communities. Things like Stack Overflow. I mean, you could really get all of your questions answered. It's a completely different workflow. But at the same time, like we were talking about, there's risk involved with it, right? It's different. It hasn't really been applied in a broad sense to AV systems. So there's things that need to be thought about and learned differently. One of them is just, keeping a connection open all the time. That's not how the web typically works. They're working on that front too, and it's gotten a lot better, and it's possible now. But there's some risk involved with applying these things. So it's a balance, and choosing the right application or the right technologies for the application is really the challenge there.
Mark, I feel like what you were discussing is really an evolution, and how we need to look at what the products that are out there and they're influencing what we're doing. How do you see the AV control system evolving? Is that are we going to be able to accomplish what we're looking, what this customization can offer within what we have today, or is that something that is going to change drastically in your opinion?
I would say that depends on the market. In the residential market, I had a crystal ball. I would imagine that most residential issues are going to be solved in the next, 5 years, 10 years or so, to where really you are kind of in whatever the big boy ecosystems are, whether it's Amazon, Google, or Apple. It's going to solve 90% of your problems. And even if it's Crestron or Control4, their kind of plug and play software is it's amazing already. And it's just getting better and better. When you look at Crestron's kind of OS3, they're kind of pushing out, I'm sure you've all seen the demo. It's exactly what should have been out, maybe 2 years ago or so. But when that's out, what are you going to do as a custom programmer that's going to deliver a faster, slicker UI than that, and really differentiate you from a guy who really doesn't know how to open his laptop barely to kind of plug and play these systems together. Nothing's going to differentiate you in my view. It's nothing that the customer cares about. It took me a long time to learn that what I thought was cool or what I thought was what needs to happen is almost irrelevant. It's really what the customer, the non-techie person, thinks that drives the market and the expectation. So as stuff kind of comes out and becomes normalized, the customer is just going to work with that ecosystem. That's kind of how I see the residential market going. The commercial market is always going to need something, but it too, you can see, is starting to be eaten up by more out-of-the-box technologies that just frankly work a lot better than these out-of-the-box technologies. Even 5 years ago, you remember setting up VTC systems, how expensive they were, how difficult they were to integrate with, just not that long ago. And now you're rolling out these Zoom rooms, you're rolling out kind of much less expensive and much easier to set up software But I think there's always going to be a market there in commercial for customization because every building is so different. And all these kind of manufacturers are out there kind of pushing their smart technology, integrating with devices that you just talk to over the network. So I don't remember what the original question was, but those are kind of the two.
Sure. That was great. Rich, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a hard one. Maybe is Mark referred to the UI and how much more can somebody want than what is offered in some of these more advanced configurable systems. Where do you see us when it comes to AI and some of these other technologies? Is that something that's going to be next for us, and we're going to be able to really make these systems a lot smarter? And is that going to become where the focus is going to be customization wise?
Well, it's interesting. The view of again of GAF or any of the others is again it needs to be a $10 million solution for them to get out of bed, right? If they're not moving a significant amount to be able to push a product through, it is or isn't going to happen. I mean, the Apple TV for Apple for the longest time, and I had spoken with project managers, was a hobby piece, and they referred to it as a hobby piece for years and years and years until they kind of got wind of, maybe the streaming thing's going to start happening. But where it stands with these systems coming through, I've kind of viewed it as early on. I always used to call it the 6 principles of automation that I used to teach, and the whole purpose of any, we would call it an overlay control system, was to flatten the friction, whether it's in the office, whether it's in the home, however any of these things do. And we always spoke to kind of the universals that everybody was looking for, right? They want it brighter, dimmer. They want it warmer, cooler. They want it louder, softer. They want it on and off, right? You have to hit that first. And when you have 7 different fragmented apps and you have all of these great features and this different UI and you're jumping back and forth, we dealt with it 25 years ago. Now, for the market that the large, the GAFA is kind of looking for, they're going to stay within that lane. And even companies like, Crestron, Control4, anybody you want to talk about, they have products that they say, hey, we're going to stay in our lane. The minute, how many times have we said, it's like kind of that Panda Express version, right? Here it is. The Kung Pao in Brooklyn is the same as Kung Pao in Nome, Alaska, right? It's always the same, no matter what. It's consistent, but no special order. So there's always going to be that derivative that wants a special order. So, is there still room for it? Absolutely. Construction's different. A 100-year-old brownstone is far different than a house that's constructed, right now. A Victorian in San Francisco is far different than, some of the pre-World War II buildings. I mean, there's always going to be something. Now, is it sustainable as a business model? That's the key now. In the old days, absolutely. I mean, you could throw a nickel and find a way to make money at it. Now it's a little different. Now you have to be a whole lot more focused in your model. But, with these systems, I view it as a lesson, constantly. It's like, what are they doing great? And you ask clients. And I absolutely think that Mark is right on it. A lot of things that we thought are important don't matter to clients. So you start throwing that stuff away. You push that stuff away. But you still get to the core of how is this system simplifying your life? Now, augmented reality, that may be coming along at some point. I know a friend of mine out in the UK has been working really hard with it, where he's trying to integrate AR with Crestron and some really fascinating ways. Is it way ahead of the curve right now? Absolutely. Doesn't mean that it won't happen or there won't be a client base to support it. There may be one coming up. Artificial intelligence. I know, what was it, maybe 2 years ago, maybe less than that, Zuckerberg tried building his Jarvis, where he built some Python scripts and he paired it with the Crestron system. So he built this one-off for himself, and the whole concept behind it was to take the Facebook technology and that he was using and kind of meshing it into the social structure of the life. And that's the interesting question. It's like, how much of your social structure of your life are you going to allow your devices to access? and live with. And generations coming forward are far more comfortable with it. There's still a block of affluent homeowners and business owners who are not about that. You know, these are the people, we're the last vestiges of people who bought albums or CDs, and you had to sit through 9 crappy songs to get to the one song you wanted. You know, we are going to see that shift sooner rather than later, and we have seen it. But, you know, for me, I don't see it as gloom and doom. I view it as opportunities. I view it as there's still opportunity to innovate. There's still opportunities to differentiate, but it requires a lot more discipline as you know, a programmer or a company owner.
And I'm just going to do a little housekeeping and define acronyms, because otherwise Tim's going to get mad at us. So GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and AI and artificial intelligence, and AR, augmented reality. So just so that everybody knows. Thank you. Mark, you know, you mentioned about, and I thought it was a very thoughtful approach, is that it doesn't really matter what we think is cool or what we want to provide. It matters what the client is interested in or wants to pay for. How do you get to the bottom of that? Because I think that's that ongoing challenge for the many years, at least, that I've been doing this.
Okay. Well, again, I would divide it into 2 different buckets. So residential and then the commercial. So we have experience with both. I have experience with both, so I can talk to both of them. I think in the residential space, people want, and are going to continue to want, kind of the things they already have. So if you have, for instance, what they're used to in their social apps, that data is very easy to manipulate, because it's all pictures and text, and it's not interfacing with physical devices, right? And so they're going to want those same experiences, except to interface with their physical devices. And you see a lot of applications that already do this just extremely well. You know, we brought up the Nest. I brought it up a little bit earlier. You know, that application is beautiful and it works so well. And you had a camera, you had a thermostat, you had a smoke detector. Now you've got 3 what we would call subsystems, just working together beautifully in this kind of beautiful UI that's very easy to control. So your customers want that, and they just want that to keep extending. So imagine a company like Nest, Google coming out with the light switch next. Okay, that's integrated. Or look at Amazon now with their integrated devices. They've already got lights and everything else, and their UI has been horrible, but they've really put a lot of effort into getting everything to talk to each other, because the UI is the easy part, and they know that. That's gonna evolve and get better and better, and before you even know it, Amazon's gonna have a completely integrated system that they've never talked about, it's never been marketed, and just works your entire house, and you don't need anything else. And they've already got the AI, the voice control, all of that stuff on the back end, right? And so they've got you interacting with your house now, but what they really want you to do is just order paper towel. I mean, that's really what they want you to do. And what technology does across the board, and what's going to do in people's houses, is make everything easier so they can sell you more stuff. That's what Facebook did. That's in the beginning, right? Make it easier to communicate with people, but we're going to be able to sell you more stuff, and your data is going to be what our product is. And it's going to be the same thing. So for Amazon, all that data of how you live in your house is what drives their marketing towards you. That's why your integration in the future is going to be practically free. And so that's how I see the residential kind of market going. In the commercial market, much harder to do, because in residential, everyone wants the same thing. We all have our lights, our HVAC, or whatever. In commercial, it's a little bit more difficult. And I think a lot of it is we've had these BMS systems for 20 years that have always promised. I don't know if everyone here probably remembers, 5-10 years ago, there was that big LEED in the United States. That is LEED. I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's a big green initiative for green buildings. So BMS systems were very popular, or starting to gain popularity, to manage your HVAC and your lighting, to reduce your energy footprint and whatnot. So I think people are still very interested in that, but it always got VE, value engineered out of these large commercial buildings, because it's one of those unnecessary costs. And if we're not trying to hit a certain LEED certification, we wouldn't do it. And it'd be the first thing to go out because it was so expensive. You know, Climatech or one of these, they'd come in and say, okay, the HVAC, it's going to be another $200,000 for HVAC control. And then the lighting, Crestron would come in with lighting, and it would be another $400,000 for lighting control. Next thing you know, you're at $1 million or whatever it was to control your building. And that was the easiest thing to cut because it was the most unnecessary thing to cut. So I think now where the opportunity is, and I can speak to this because we built our co-host platform to also do building management really well, is to do that all in the software. Be able to integrate with all those devices, give people a solution that isn't super expensive upfront hardware solution, right? I used to go in with hey, I remember doing a project once where we were trying to sell 128 by 128 DM blade system. You guys remember? I think they're still around. Sure. And that thing ended up being like $200,000 or something for video switching. And even when I was putting it together, I thought about how ridiculous that was, 5 years ago or whatnot. And then what's the solution? Well, we're already utilizing this manufacturer's piece, and now we need to utilize their lighting control. There's another $300,000. Now we have to use their HVAC. And the reason you would do that as an integrator, and the reason the manufacturer would love you to do that, is because it's all easier for me to put together for you. And that has not won. And Amazon's like the proof of that. And Google's, it is not won, and it's not going to win. It's just like a constant battle. But your construction guys, these builders, if a guy comes in at $200,000 and another guy comes in at $100,000, they're going with the $100,000. So you better know how to integrate with that. So that's probably a long answer, but I think that's what you have to do, is build software that can give people that beautiful UI and beautiful experience, no matter what hardware they've selected, and always keep it up to date. Because another thing we've done to the industry that was a hard lesson for me to learn was, you'll sell a guy something for $200,000-$300,000. And what you never tell them, and what you're almost not honest with yourself about, is, hey, you get to spend another $100,000 in 5 years to make your system not look outdated. And then 5 years after that, you get to spend another $100,000. And when you do that a couple of times, you go, oh, maybe this wasn't the right solution in the first place. Would it have been so bad to run an HDMI cable from my DirecTV to my TV instead of swapping out my PVids for DMs, and now I'm going to go swap them out for NVX at $50,000 a pop? It's kind of ridiculous, right? So anyway.
Thank you. So Patrick, we'll wrap up with you, and this is a great conversation. If you were to give advice to somebody who is looking to really differentiate themselves, what would you share with them? What can they do to prepare themselves? And I'm guessing this is going to be a programmer or an integrator type of a person.
Sure. So we've heard a lot of some doom and gloom, some opportunity. You started the conversation with talking about how could this be interesting for programmers. So I'm going to take that as a baseline, that you don't just want to shift boxes for a living, that you're looking for, how am I going to be relevant and still enjoy my career moving forward? And I think software obviously has the most potential. And it's not clear how that's going to be. It's not going to be the same. We're not going to be writing only complete custom projects. But one opportunity that may be there, like what Mark was saying, you have to be able to work with any kind of system that gets installed. So looking at APIs, and maybe we just become the people who connect different APIs. Maybe we don't do any GUIs at all anymore, or much less, right? So I think we focus a lot on the GUI, and I'm looking more at the data channel, connecting different devices and services together. And I think really that's where someplace we could focus on to grow as programmers, software developers, and move our businesses and careers forward.
Well, thank you. this has been a great conversation, a great show, and unfortunately we have to bring it to a close, but I'm sure that there's a lot more discussion to come in the future, and I appreciate all your guys' insight. So first, I'd like to thank Patrick Murray for being part of the show. Patrick, how can people get in touch with you, learn about the things that you're doing? I know that there's many.
Sure. Go to learnavprogramming.com. You could find me through that website. I also started a new technology management application. You could find out about that at catchtechnologies.com. And I'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. So Mark, thank you for being a part of the show. Mark Day from IdeaBox. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about your company?
First, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
Glad to have you on.
Thank you. I've had my head down, and we've kind of had our developers' heads down for the last year, just really working on software. So we haven't really been out and about, not a lot of trade shows, not a lot of doing anything else but work. So currently, ideabox.co, that's my integration company. We do a lot of work here in the Vegas area, and a little bit in California and Utah. And then if you want to check out cohost.io, I'm not even sure that the website's up quite yet, but that's the new product we've been working on for the last year, and hopefully we'll be hearing more about that in the future.
Thanks. And last but not least, Uncle Richie, how can people get in touch with you who don't already know, and what have you been up to?
You can always find me on the interwebs. You can type in my name in any Googles or GAFA device, I'm sure. But you can find me at fregosadesign.com. You can find me at rfregosa on Twitter. But first and foremost, look for me here on AVNation.tv with my good friend Steve, or at times with my good friend Matt Scott over at Resi Week. But yeah, first and foremost, come visit us at avnation.tv. Click on, check out the podcast, hang out, make a day of it. My mother will thank you for
it. Very nice. I appreciate that. I wish that I could say the same. It's been a while. I've been trying to get my mom to listen, but I'm not sure that she does still. So my name is Steve Greenblatt. I've been your host. So you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on many social media platforms, or visit my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. To echo what Rich was saying, please check out avnation.tv, check out this show and a bunch of other shows, as well as coverage from trade shows, including ISE, Digital Signage Expo is coming up, Infocom, of course, in the near future. While you're on the website, check out the supporters that support AVNation and show them that you appreciate them. They help us to bring these shows and others to the airwaves. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so please reach out and send Rich or I a note, or reach out and give us a review on iTunes or on the website. We'd really like to hear what you think, and we'd also be open to ideas with regard to future topics and shows. So until next time, this has been A State of Control.